When the channel launched 18 months ago, there were about 30 scripts in existence at that time, of varying degrees of production. And if I'm honest, some haven't got much further forward in production since then, largely because I'm really easily distracted. Pearl Harbor didn't feature anywhere amongst them, and it stayed off my radar until a documentary which was featured on TV in the UK earlier on this year, which I know a couple of my fellow Brits in the Discord channel also watched. The story of Pearl Harbor wasn't one I knew in any great depth. I mean, I'd seen the movies, but there was a lot in that documentary. I'm not sure if it's just that people in the UK don't know it as much, or if in the wider history it's not known. But there was a lot that was new to me. One of those things was the story of the USS Nevada. At the time of the attack, the Nevada was on Battleship Row, but because it wasn't blocked in by any of the other ships, it was able to manoeuvre out and head into the harbour during the attack. The fact that her magazines were empty meant that when she was attacked and sustained hits, there were less fires, there's less damage, less detonations than on the other ships. And she was able to make a run for it for about 2 hours, taking damage from the Japanese, but downing multiple enemy planes until she finally caught fire and ran aground off Hospital Point. Another story I'd never heard before was that of the Cassin and the Downs. And these were a pair of Marne-class destroyers, which at the time of the attack were both blocked up in dry dock number 1, awaiting modification and upgrade. As the Japanese attack came in, both the destroyers were in various states of having had their armour and their hulls stripped back. Their main armament was removed, their crews were ashore, but the crews that were on board opened fire with their guns, and an hour later, after both had taken multiple hits and their own munitions had exploded, sadly the two sister ships still tied to each other were flaming hulks settling down under the water. In the aftermath of the battle, the Navy's immediate reaction was to scrap both ships, but slowly the idea of repairing and relaunching them as symbolic survivors of the attack took hold, and they were both active again in the Pacific towards the end of the war. So, after I'd watched this documentary, I began to wonder, look, is there a story here? Can I do something with it? Can I add an element of horror? And I came upon the idea of a Japanese survivor, a lone survivor, facing off in the aftermath of the attack against something from Hawaiian legend, something that's going to punish him for what he's done to the island. This, as I've explained before, is literally the most simple formula to how an unclassified encounter story gets made. Take historical battle A, add monster B, stir and simmer till done. The only problem was, where was I going to find a survivor from? Because a quick check of the figures indicated that numbers were not on my side. During the attack, it's estimated the Japanese lost 129 dead, and these were mainly the crews of the 29 aircraft that the Americans were able to shoot down. Unsurprisingly, people leaving an aircraft at height, no survivors there. But astoundingly, there was a single Japanese survivor as a result of the attack, the first Japanese prisoner of war of the conflict. And he didn't come from a plane. He came from one of 5 Japanese midget subs that participated in the attack. The Japanese A-class midget sub was just large enough to carry 2 450mm torpedoes, one either side of her hull, and a 2-man crew inside to operate. For a long time, for many years after the attack, the use of the mini-subs wasn't really known. And it was only as the wrecks were gradually found and photo recon evidence was found from the Japanese side after the war that it was realised what role they played in proceedings. At about 6:30 in the morning of the attack, the destroyer USS Ward saw a submarine periscope trying to follow a transport ship into the mouth of the harbour. The destroyer fired several shells, conducted a depth charge attack, and in doing so sunk HA-20, which was the first Japanese sub to be lost during the battle. At some point during the attack, HA-18 was depth charged by American forces and abandoned by her crew before she could fire her torpedoes. Their fate is ultimately unknown, but the wreck was found in 1960 in Kihei Lagoon, east of the harbour entrance. HA-22 managed to successfully infiltrate the harbour and launched her torpedoes at the USS Monaghan. She missed, and shortly after this, she was lost with both hands when the Monaghan promptly retaliated with a depth charge attack. Similarly, HA-16 managed to infiltrate the harbour, and when aerial photos from a Japanese plane were analysed in detail many years later, they seemed to show the back of the midget sub rearing out of the water, having fired its torpedoes. It's been speculated that it's these torpedoes hitting the USS Oklahoma that caused her to deteriorate as quickly as they did. But a number of ships, including the USS St. Louis and the USS Helm, also reported having been torpedoed by a midget sub, according to what their crew had seen. After the attack, HA-16 sent a series of radio messages reporting its success and how successful the attack had been, but then these ceased. The wreck was found in 1944 in the West Loch, and it's believed that the crew may have abandoned it and tried to get to shore and failed after the attack. HA-19 didn't make it into the harbour because it became trapped on a reef outside of, and you're going to have to forgive the pronunciation because I'm not American, let alone Hawaiian, Waimanalo Beach, as it tried to get in. The two crew couldn't get free from the reef, so they decided to scuttle it, set the charges and blow it up, which failed. One of the crew drowned trying to get to shore, and the other, again, forgive the pronunciation, Kazuo Sakamaki, woke up several hours later to find himself in a hospital under armed guard because he'd been found unconscious on the beach by a passing patrol. He quite cheerfully asked if he could kill himself and was quite cheerfully told no, and spent the rest of the war in captivity. Unfortunately for him, the Japanese government had decided to declare all 10 sailors heroes and dead, and so his service record was closed down, and they refused to believe that he could still be alive because they didn't believe in POWs, so he was declared dead until he became home many years later after the war. And HA-19 was recovered, and it toured the country during the war as an exhibit to raise war bonds. So with the story of HA-19 under my belt, I thought that we got a feasible and believable excuse to find a survivor. The next question was going to be, what's going to come after him? Again, a little bit like Pearl Harbor, legend and lore of the Hawaiian people, not a strong area for me. So I had to turn to the internet for a bit of inspiration. God bless the internet. For a short time, the ghost of the Green Lady Child Snatcher was winning. Google it. But eventually I settled on the night marches. In essence, these are the spirits of those who've previously fallen in battle, and at night they get up from their burial grounds and they walk across the island to where they died, and they walk back again. They appeal to me because it's a nice hybrid of a zombie story and a ghost story. I've spoken before about how I don't like going full zombie, but I don't mind going a little bit close and a little bit different to it, like we did with the Morgan in Holland. I also like the idea that although they're capable of brutally slaughtering you or dragging you off into the underworld when they go back to their burial ground, if you show deference and respect and turn away, they may well let you live. And this seems to be a nice little aspect of Hawaiian culture, which I've seen elsewhere, in that as long as you're a good and a spiritual person, there's always a fair chance that fate is going to come through for you and spare you. I hope I haven't gone wildly away from the core beliefs in relation to the night marches, and that if any of the good people of Hawaii watch this, they take the depiction in the spirit in which it was intended. I kind of feel towards them now the same way that I do about the Bok and the Chinook when I did their story. And I hope that by incorporating them into this channel, it raises their profile a bit and it makes people show a little bit more interest in them and the surrounding lore. Anyway, as always, feel free to feed me back any observations you've got on the video or the channel in general. I'll probably do another Q&A at some point in the future, just to canvass how things are going. Thanks again for everyone's support, for the comments, for the feedback. It's largely positive, particularly if you've managed to get yourself onto Discord, where you've been chatting about things, and those of you on Patreon as well who contribute. A massive thanks. I probably wouldn't still be doing this without you guys. I will see you next time round for another story.